Guys, we might get started if everyone's seated and ready to go. Right to go up the back. Beautiful. All right, well, thanks for coming along. My name's Mitch Plum. I'll be chairing this session this afternoon. My role with MLA is a project manager within the producer adoption team with a particular focus on the Southern Rangelands. So Far West New South Wales is certainly a key focus area of mine, and certainly one that MLA more broadly has identified to try and increase some engagement in and get a few more runs on the board. So events like this are certainly a good step towards that. And hopefully everyone can get a bit of value out of the day. For the few of you in the room I don't know, some of my background prior to joining MLA is largely in a livestock extension role with local land services, where I was based in Broken Hill for about 6 years. So it's really nice to be back. Look, this afternoon's session we'll have 3 different speakers, and I think they tie in really well with some of the key themes that were coming out of this morning. Some of those big overarching ideas of database decisions and utilising tools and technologies to help you as managers make more informed decisions on farm. So I think they'll be fruitful conversations. So the first speaker we have this afternoon, we'll get straight into it, and I'll introduce Shane Oster from the Alpha Group. We heard a bit about the technology he'll be talking about today in the virtual farm tour. So Shane Oster is a consultant and ag tech supplier in the industry and has spent a number of years in the industry. He'll be talking particularly today about water monitoring technology and how that can be used to increase efficiencies and make your life easier on farm. So I'll hand over to you, Shane.
Thanks, Mitch. So we've all sort of seen a few different massive changes in agriculture over time with the implementation of GPS and no-till. Unfortunately for the livestock industry, shearing's perhaps not evolved as much as what everyone would like it to do. A lot of the big changes have been in broadacre ag, but we're sort of starting to see it rolling out across the livestock systems, and probably for the first time really is that we're actually able to piggyback on the types of things which all other industries are actually getting benefit from, and we can actually utilise it in ag as well. And so one of those is connectivity. So with that, we're not alone. Everyone else wants to connect everything to the internet these days, and on farm we have a lot of uses for that. So whether you're ready for it or not, it's coming. Probably for a lot of people, though, the guy on the left and a lot of the people who are perhaps my age are getting close to the one on the right and embracing it and enjoying it and reaping the fruits and rewards from it. Everyone would have heard of the expression IoT, which is Internet of Things, but I've seen a modification on my slide here. I'm thinking, I didn't write WTH. Thanks, Caroline. So, yeah, I had WTF, and so... and that's what it is for most people. What's this IoT that everyone talks about? And it's really confusing for a lot of people because it's actually not one thing. There's a whole heap of technologies which are all being lumped into this category of IoT. And IoT's the new, cool, trendy thing in agriculture, and everything's all about IoT. But it's not one thing. It's not just one type of internet connection. But if you take it at its most basic meaning, it's just things that are connected to the internet, and it's not new. We've been doing it for, a couple decades really. What has changed is what we're doing with it, and the types of things that we're connecting to it. So, we've had soil moisture probes and weather stations connected to the internet for ages. And so when we're thinking about connectivity, it's more of a concept as to how we want it. So, in the home, we want our washing machine and our fridge and our lights and every electrical device to be able to be connected to the internet and not have to have it so that, you have to go through a certain portal to be able to do it. You want to have everything connected and accessible at one time. And so trying to create more of a web structure rather than a hierarchy structure like we've had in the past. So yeah, what's changed and what hasn't? It's basically the communication protocols, and not unlike what we're using for communicating on your properties. It was always, UHF radios, and then a lot of us went to CDMA and NextG, and then we're sort of the next evolution is Cat M1. So as many of you would be aware, 3G's been great, but as of June 2024, 3G's getting its throat cut. So we're sort of having to change and evolve with what we're doing. So the thing which is sort of going to need to change going forward is the cost of the connection of devices. It's not there yet, but that's sort of perhaps where everyone's got their eye on the prize is having 100 things connected on a property rather than 2 or 3, and hopefully not cost a lot more. I think back to my early days in consulting, and my phone bills were, $400 to $500 a month, and that was just what we did because we had to. But if they're over $100 a month now, you're on the wrong plan. So in that whole ecosystem, which is a word that I hate, but that whole group of IoT, you perhaps would have heard a lot about LoRaWAN, which is Long Range Wide Area Network, Cat M1, which is basically a phone system, and that's what the system that we're sort of moving to. It operates on the same frequency as 4G, but it's very different to 4G. With 4G you get 5 to 8 Ks out of town, and it's all over on your phone, whereas the Cat M1, it's operating on the same frequency, but it'll go a long way. And then the new one, which is sort of, it's out there, is all these low orbit satellites. So instead of a satellite being, the size of a truck, they're the size of a suitcase. And so companies like Fleet and Myriota are looking at putting hundreds and eventually thousands of these things into the atmosphere and picking up very small packet sizes of information and theoretically being very cheap. But there's a couple other networks, Taggle and Sigfox, but on stations it's really tricky with a lot of those network type systems because the distances are so vast, and so trying to bounce from one system to the other, it's either geographically impossible because of the distance, or quite often topographically impossible because you've got a mountain range in between. So having some of those network-based approaches aren't appropriate. So for you guys who are on the properties and you're looking at the opportunities as to what is going to work for you and where you're doing it. So as Seth alluded to, we've done quite a bit of work for Coopers on both Wonga and Majura and Kuraby as well. So this is a snapshot of the map of Majura, and it looks really innocent and quite small and manageable when you put it on a page like that. But if I've got a pointer here, that's the homestead there, and that's the front gate, and it takes an hour and a half to get from the front gate to the homestead. And then this was the biggest development that Coopers did when they started. They put a bore field out the back here, which was all very good water, but it basically feeds this whole empty space through here. So, you're piping at 60 odd Ks from front to back. And so they're absolutely reliant on that bore field at the back. And so for them, it was at least an hour and a half trip one way to go to check the bore fields every day. So now with telemetry hooked up to there, before they even leave the homestead, they can know exactly what's happening, whether they've got a disaster on their hands for the day or whether everything's performing properly. So Bess, who does the water runs there, she's divided the place up into 6 different water runs. And so each of those takes a day if nothing goes wrong. And so unless there's multiple people on the run, the best that you can do is get round every 6 days. And so the problem with that is that there's a lot of shit that can go wrong in 6 days. And so with the system now, she's got visibility over the whole network. And so there's not every tank monitored by any means, but the primary pumping systems and the primary header tank systems are monitored, and there's the tanks at the ends of the lines are monitored, so you know if you've got water there, you've got water on the others, so they're quite strategic with how many sites I've got. And so when she starts her day and looks at all the data, she knows whether she needs to continue on her normal 6-day loop or whether she needs to drop tools and head out to try and get one of the bores going. So connectivity is what's going to shape the way that we do things going forward. We're all searching for efficiency in our businesses, whether that's efficiency through productivity gains, using ABVs, improving growth rates, wool production, but a lot of it's also labour, making sure that we are efficient with what we've got, and it's hard to get people to work for you, and it's hard to get them to stay there, and so making sure that we can utilise a pretty skinny labour resource is pretty important. So the basic concept, whether it's our system or anything else that you use these days, the basic concept is that the system will just send the information straight up to the internet, and it'll connect via satellite or NextG. And then with our system, every morning at about 7:30, it'll send you a text message telling you the information, the tank level, the flow rates, the minimum flow rates. And so it's really important, that daily text message. It can be email as well, for that matter. I'll just go back a sec. And that is a really important piece of information because it's proof of life as well. If you're just waiting for a tank level sensor to send you an alert when it drops below a metre, if there's a fault with it and the sensor's gone to bilio and it's reading 3.6 metres, you're never going to get the alert. So that daily alert is really critical. The question I have the most from people is, do you have cameras? And if you don't have them, why don't you have them? I want cameras. And there's been the mindset, because that was the early sort of thing with people in the stations in particular. There's a windmill which pumps into a tank that goes to a trough. And so they had a camera pointing at the trough and the tank, and they could work out exactly what they're doing. And in that situation, it's fine. But you take this picture that I stole off of the internet from Alamy, and you go, I want cameras. And you look at that picture and you go, okay, those 3 lambs there, are they about to drink, or have they drunk, or are they not drinking because there's dust on the trough? And you go, rightio, well, I better have a look at that picture again in another hour. And you get back and there's some sheep standing around and you go, is that the same ones or is that different ones? And are they not drinking, or are they still just hanging around, or are they just camping there because that's where the rest of the sheep are? And so you don't have the same level of visibility. People say, what if there's a sheep in the trough? You know with flow rate, because there's no water going through because the sheep aren't drinking. So for me, flow data is the absolute game changer for these types of systems. So this is, it looks a bit rough, but this is Cooper's set up out the right out in their northern boundary at Majura, and you can see all the flow meters installed along here. I think they've got a new tank in since I took that photo, but they've got 4 submersible pumps pumping into the tank, and then that little pump there, that pumps it on to a couple of other sites from there. So we're measuring 4, I think it's actually now 5 inputs. There's another bore now, plus 2 outputs, plus rain gauge, tank level, and then 2 lots of pump pressure. So there's a lot of stuff going on there, but they've got full visibility over that system now, and they can tell everything that's going on. A lot of the systems that I have are down my way and on the Eyre Peninsula in SA, where we're on SA water meters, and so people would historically read their meters once a week to make sure they haven't got any major leaks, and we're paying about $3.50 a kilolitre, so for our water down there, so the cost can get away from you pretty well. But one thing people realise once they get telemetry installed is that a weekly average, it's only an average, and an average isn't quite accurate enough because the daily use patterns vary dramatically. You have a shower of rain and stock won't drink, and so once you start using the data, you understand a lot more about your sheep or your cattle. You feed out hay and your water usage goes through the roof. You'll find the differences with the types of feed they're on, whether on salt bush or grasses. And then with the online graphs, you can pick out major leaks pretty easily. So all of that stuff with tank levels great, but you don't know whether your tank level is static because you've got quite a few leaks happening, but you're matching that with the input. So, your tank level's still okay, but then you have one day where it's a bit overcast, so you're not getting the amount of flow in, or else you have a high stock water usage day and next minute you're going away. Whereas if you can monitor your outflow, you can pick up on these things and fix them within 24 hours. This is a classic story that we see for what we call a slow leak. So you think that 150 litre an hour leak is a fair bit. You do the maths on that, and that's, over 3,000 litres a day or 4,000 litres a day that you're losing. You think, surely that would show up. It doesn't. It's so hard. You might have a little wet patch in the ground, and so quite often it takes it, a bit longer to find the leaks than you think. And this is a classic example where you can see it was cruising along 150 odd litres, slowly got worse and worse, and then that pipe finally split and gave way, and they were able to find it. But they know that it's there, they're looking, they're just not finding it, and this is absolutely classic data. And then this is just another one. You can see that real fluctuation in usage, which is all the daytime usage, and then it's just really flatlining at night, which is an absolute mozza for a slow leak. So essentially between about midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning, stock won't drink. That's and the only exception to that generally is if sheep are in a feedlot, they'll drink all night then. So we've been installing, we call them leak detection units, since 2010. Our systems have evolved a lot over that time and continue to evolve. The telemetry provider we use is called WildEye. And it's changed a lot because the way that we consume data has changed dramatically over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. We're not locked to our PCs anymore. Most things are on phones and iPads. And so the way that we're looking at it is different, and so we need to adapt to make sure that the displays are right on those. And the other thing that we're sort of adapting for is to handle products as a network. So people are getting more and more devices, and we've got to be able to have systems that allow us to have visibility over a number of devices at once rather than just looking at one system, which was quite often happened in the past. So WildEye have got a new app which has been really cool. They've had one for a while, but they've made some changes in the last few months which has significantly improved the usage and how we utilise the data. So we can do, like I said, we can filter it so they can have a map view. You can quickly look and see how much rain you've had across your properties, or just tank levels. So this is one, oops, I went too far. So you can quickly have a snapshot across there and look at the different tank levels across your property. So one of the things that we pride ourselves on is having a very flexible platform. The systems that I use, they only sell telemetry units. All of the sensors that we use I sort of source from different companies. So they've had a very open platform where they'll basically read anything. So we can add rain gauges, tank level sensors, pressure gauges, salinity meters, soil moisture probes, weather stations, wind meters, and pretty much whatever you can dream up, we're able to measure it on our system, and it's quite unique for that. A lot of the others are quite limiting. So that's just a normal tipping bucket rain gauge. I think Seth had a picture of one, which it's amazing how variable it is. And I was listening to Seth last night and today talking to his neighbours, and they're talking about the strips of rain that have gone through, and when you have a big property, it can be very diverse across it, and you might think that you've missed out on a rainfall event, but the reality is it may have picked up a strip through the bottom end, and it can really change the way that you manage your property. So tank level sensors, we can do it a couple of ways. We can have one that suspends down in the tank, or one that measures from the bottom on the outside. This is just a little solar pump, mobile solar pump. We can have an electronic pressure gauge on there, or on 240 volt pumps as well. And then the other picture here is just pressure reducing valves. So a lot of systems on Murray water in South Australia suffer from really high pressure. So that's pressure reducing valve, and we can monitor the health of the PRV. They don't last very well, so with that it'll report the maximum pressure every day. So if your PRV starts to crap itself, you can go and service it or replace it. Salinity meter, soil moisture probe, which is perhaps not so appropriate for you guys, and the weather stations. And we do the majority of the installs ourselves. If it's just a simple tank level sensor, just doing tank level, people can do it themselves, but with all the tank systems, we'll come and install it for you, which there's a real shift towards putting stuff in a box and sending it to people, and it's not always appropriate. So take-home messages, ensure that your system is flexible and scalable. Everyone's, like with EID, it's sort of an all or nothing. You kind of want to be getting right into it, but with this stuff you can start with one system. You just want to make sure that you can expand it down the track. Don't get too worried about the hardware. What you're buying is time. Once you put the system in, you never really look at it again because you don't have to go out to the sites. The third one, there's a lot of information to be gained from the flow data, and it's probably different to where a lot of other businesses are going, and I can't stress the importance of that enough. And the quality of the alerts is the cornerstone of the product. So for a lot of my clients, that text message they get every day is absolute gold. And if there's a problem with the system, you get a lot of phone calls pretty quickly because people just come to rely on it. They forget how they used to do it. They forget that they can drive out and look at a tank or a water meter because they're so used to getting it on their phone. And that's me. There's a couple of programs which are subsidising the likes of this AgTech. Thanks for your time.
I should mention this at the start, but just due to split sessions, we'll just take questions from the floor rather than on the app. Has anyone got questions they'd like to shoot first up?
Just a subscription cost for that?
On NextG or CAT M1 stuff, it's $250 for your first unit per year, and all of the others are $200 after that. And so the only difference there is that that $50 extra basically pays for your daily text message. So yeah, $200 a year.
That's each unit. So if I have 6 units, it's
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you do satellite unit change?
Yeah. So at Madura, there's a mix of satellite and NextG. So yeah.
Yes, Jane. At home we got FarmBot, but we haven't got flow meters or anything like that. But we have a header tank, and you just get a feel over the few days. You might go down. It's going down 0.4 of a centimetre an hour at the moment because it's raining, but it might do one and a bit centimetres. And as soon as it starts to rise a bit, you go and have a look because you know either that something's drinking a lot more or we got a leak.
Mm-hmm.
And it just your nose tells you what's happening.
Anybody else?
Lifespan, look, it's hard to say. Like most electronics, you can have a TV that lasts for 20 years, or you can have a TV that dies after 12 months. One thing that Wild Eye have been amazing on is their support. So the systems I got, they're just a little grey box, and so in the back end we can do what we call a hot swap, and so if one of them dies, essentially I can just send you a new unit, 2 screws and undo a couple of plugs, and you can replace it. You know, anyone can do it, and it's really simple. And Wild Eye are amazing with their backup. If you've had a unit and if you've had them for 10 years and it dies, you never ever pay full cost again. They're just absolutely outstanding on that. So, for example, a new tank system's just under $1,500, and if your telemetry unit died after 5 years, it'd be $350 to replace it, which is, in my opinion, amazing.
Yeah, we'll go with one last question, Shane. If a producer's thinking about getting into these systems, into some new technologies, new connectivity, etc., where are the best places for them to go to find the information they need? Yep.
No, that's a bit of a Dorothy Dix, that one, but of course me. But one of the things I do encourage people to do is to be a little bit selective about who they're going with. There's right through the ag industry at the moment, there's been a lot of funding going into tech startup companies, and to me it's really concerning because it gives them a false sense of success, in that their business is not successful because they got the runs on the board from providing products to clients over a long period of time and backing them up. They're there because they've been able to sell a good story, and someone's decide to drop a couple $1 million in to get their business going. And so you want to be quite confident that the business that you're going to invest in is going to be there in 5 years' time. And the reality is that 90% of tech startups fail within the first 3 years. So you want to make sure that you back someone who's going to be there in 3 years' time, because they won't all be there.
Thanks, Shane. That's great.